Welcome to the Human Performance Outliers podcast with your host, Zach Bitter. At Human Performance Outliers podcast, we dive into a wide range of topics, including health, fitness, and training strategies, to name a few. If you enjoy the show and wish to support, please visit patreon.com/HPO podcast. If you do not use Patreon or wish to make a one-time donation, please visit the show PayPal page at paypal.me/HPO pod. Links to both of those can be found in the show notes. Also, consider subscribing to us on your favorite podcast listening platform and on our video version of the show hosted on YouTube. For updates and notifications, please visit my social media channels at ZachBitter on Instagram, at ZBitter on Twitter, and at Zach.Bitter on Facebook. If you wish to sponsor the show or have any other questions or feedback, please reach out to me at hpopodcast@gmail.com. All right, folks, welcome back to another episode of HPO podcast. This episode has been one I've been kind of anticipating for a bit here, and I'm excited about it. I've got Pete Kostelnick coming on the show here today, and he is the man when it comes to multi-day, long haul, whether it be supported or unsupported efforts. He's done some huge projects. He's the record holder for the cross-country or transcontinental run, where you run from San Francisco to New York. It's a slightly over 3,000-mile route or 5,000-kilometer route, and he averaged just over 72 miles a day for that effort, setting the record. And he's going to share some of his stories about that, some of the stuff that was insightful for that, as I'm kind of planning on kind of following his footsteps in September. And I actually, when I think of Pete, I also think of another big project that he did right after the transcontinental thing that may have been even more like otherworldly, which was a self-supported run from Alaska down to the Florida Keys. So he essentially picked what I would imagine is the longest possible route to going from one part of the country to another part of the country. He pushed a stroller, and Pete, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe you averaged over 50 miles a day for that project.
About 55 or so.
It's mind-boggling. You know, one thing I've been getting interested in the last couple of months as I kind of prepare for my own cross-country project is just kind of looking into some of these guys and gals who've done these big multi-day doesn't give it justice. It's like multi-week. And, you know, I was talking to, you probably know Ray Zahab. He did the Sahara round. They ran about 100 kilometers a day through that effort. And some of your projects, as well as these others, it's just really interesting to kind of hear the stories behind it, what went into kind of actually getting it off the ground in the first place. Because it's not something you just show up for. It's like the ultra running community, you can kind of just show up for races unprepared sometimes, and it's probably going to be a little more painful than if you're prepared. But with something like a cross-country run, or certainly one where you're self-supporting yourself, you kind of have to have your T's crossed and I's dotted, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for having me, man. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. It's such an enigma. It's just so, I can't really think of anything else like that a human would undertake that is growing in such popularity, like a transcontinental, whether it's a walk, a run, even cycling. Like, it's just such a bizarre endeavor on so many levels, just with what goes into it. So yeah, it's always a lot of fun to talk about.
Mm-hmm. One thing I'm still juggling around in my head, and I'll probably continue to do this all the way up until the start, and then maybe even adapt it as it goes along, is like a strategy for what you want to do on any one given day. Because for myself, who's been essentially a single day ultramarathon athlete to date, this is just something so much different than what I normally kind of build myself up to mentally and physically, where the way I describe, say, like a 100-mile race is I'm putting myself in a position where in order to perform, I'm going to wreck myself with the anticipation I don't have to move the next few days if I don't want to. Whereas for something like a cross-country run or transcontinental run, you're running, for you anyway, 72 plus miles per day. And then, but you're doing it with the mindset that not only do you have to get up and do it the next day again, but then the day after that, the day after that, day after that. how does that kind of frame your strategy? Or do you even have a strategy, or are you just kind of listening to your body the whole time and just kind of responding to what it gives you?
Yeah, it's really scary because like, I would get done for the day. And it was funny, especially like once I was used to the way I felt at the end of the day, like, so like, getting done with 70, 2 miles or however far it is, and then sitting down in an RV for dinner and then getting up, half an hour later and you can barely walk. Like you're just like, I'll try to do it tomorrow, but I don't know if it's going to happen or not. Like, and it's such a weird feeling because you're just like, I couldn't, I mean, you feel basically the way you feel after, or at least for me, like after doing a 100-mile race, where you're just like, well, I'm not going back out there to like do more miles. So like, I'm just going to put my feet up for a number of days, but you got to go back out in like 8 hours to do it again. So yeah, it was just really weird. It was like trying to become comfortable with that feeling every day. And I think it took me, 2 to 3 weeks of knowing that how you feel to start the next day isn't going to be how you feel 2 miles down the road once your legs are loosened back up. So, the first couple of weeks, it was just kind of I don't even know what I'm doing type of thing. Like there was so much going on that I was just like, I think that there was so much adrenaline. Like there wasn't like any routine. It was just like go, go, go mode. But then once I was, a couple weeks in, I think like into Utah, about, like a third of the way in, I started to feel like, okay, like this is like the daily routine. Wake up 10 minutes earlier every day to account for all the time zone changes, all these types of things. It's like, it was so streamlined once I was a couple weeks in mentally and physically. But yeah, it takes a long time to get comfortable with.
Yeah, I mean, the human body is amazing like that. One thing you actually touched on, kind of one of the questions I wanted to ask you, because I've been speaking with some guys who've done some of these bigger efforts like 6-day events, or like Vol State's another one that is kind of a similar type of structure, where the thing they always have been telling me that's been fairly consistent is that like really your body does kind of adapt. So like the worst time is actually for the 6-day folks, they always have told me like the second day is the worst, because they have like this situation where obviously they did enough the day before to be pretty wrecked, even if they're conservative. And then they have to get up and do it again, and they're staring down 5 more days, and they have to do that first day where they're running on just really sore, tight, tired legs. And then by like maybe the 3rd or 4th day, they've more or less kind of normalized it to a degree. Did that kind of happen? It sounds like you're kind of saying that it maybe took a little longer for something like what you're doing, but you're 2-3 weeks in, your body more or less started to normalize what you were doing. And I'm sure it was still incredibly difficult, but did you feel like your body was almost recovering on the fly or speeding up its recovery process to the point where it became naturalized and you were just like, all right, now it's just rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat?
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, and I think it took me a little longer to get there than I had hoped, because I went out too hard the first few days, and I had a day where I took a day off on day 7, which was not an easy decision. So I think that first week I kind of screwed up, and then on the second week I was kind of like I was still putting in 70 miles a day, but I was actually recovering while doing that from some tendonitis that I developed early on in the first 4 or 5 days. So yeah, I could definitely, like, had that tendonitis not happened, I might have settled in a little bit earlier mentally and physically. But yeah, it's crazy because it's like, towards the end in Pennsylvania, I remember my feet, like the bones in my feet from all the steps were just destroyed. Like they just felt destroyed and bruised. But other than that, like physically, like, swollen knee in Indiana, I didn't care. Like it just, like, all these things happening, like these little injuries just didn't really like concern me at all. So yeah, it's weird because it's like, your body is doing incredible things where you can have a swollen knee one day and it's gone the next. And but then just, I think a lot of it's mental too. And just like not having the confidence that you're not going to have to worry, like just freak out about something that happens because you've kind of seen it all once you're, a week or two into that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it seems almost as if like it's not a question of whether something is gonna like flare up on you, like a minor running related injury, but when and then how are you gonna be able to manage that? So I kind of think 100 milers have a little bit of that too, where something's gonna happen you didn't expect and you have to be ready to respond to it. And the people who are the most successful, or at least the most consistent, are able to uh, see those happening as they're happening, make the adjustments, not overthink it, and kind of move on, and then carry on. Like really quick decision making, but like good decision making too. And for something like a cross country run, I would imagine it's just like one after the other, one after the other, rather than maybe just feeling like a couple might pop up.
Yeah. Yeah. And the good thing is like, for like 100 miler, at the very, the people that are winning them, you can't afford to like have more than a bad mile or two.
Mm-hmm.
But then like in the transcon, it's like if you want to walk the next 10 miles because you're upset about something or like something went wrong, you can. And so, that's the thing that I enjoyed, was that you do have a lot of flexibility to maybe not screw up like an entire day or two, but like if something goes wrong, like our car got totaled. The crew car got smashed in Indiana, and it was funny because I looked back on my Strava and I actually only lost 30 minutes because of it. That's how good my crew was. They took care of the car wreck without me there. But it's like, something like that could happen, and you're not really going to lose. You're not going to lose your progress. So yeah, I think that's the one good thing about it. It's just, for me, I'm really good about not worrying about, what's way ahead. Like I'm not worried about having 2,000 miles to go. I'm really just kind of in the moment. So that was why, I think that's why things of that format work well for me, because, I have a little bit of flexibility within the day to mess something up and recover from it, and not, to get discouraged by, a bad day or two.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think the logistics side of this project is something that I think people may be watching, or at least when I was following yours, I probably took for granted. Is there's a lot of things that can go wrong that are independent of you actually moving forward. Like you're hauling an RV or a small house along the way. And it sounds like you had a chase car or something as well. Does how much planning did you do for that to kind of get ready for that? Like, how did you go? What was the process of like, okay, we need to get an RV that we can have for the entirety of this project. The project could take, you were probably, I'm just guessing here, estimating between like 5 and 8 weeks potentially. And like, how did you kind of begin that process?
Yeah, I was really lucky looking back on it, because I had no idea what I was doing. I like, as far as like an RV, I was just like, I remember messaging like friends that I went to high school with that I knew had an RV, and just like a piece of junk that like, hey, can I borrow this from you? Like, kind of, because I didn't really know if I'd have any sponsorship or anything for it. And so, I was just kind of going about it, and I didn't do my planning until like a few months out. But I just got really lucky, because I think I socialized it enough with friends that, like Charlie Angle, for example, who, ran across the Sahara.
Mm-hmm.
He hooked me up with a couple guys that have crewed for him a lot and stuff like that. And so like, that was like having that foundation of like someone. It almost felt like Charlie wanted me to go for this record more than I did, because like he was so helpful. And then one of the most important people, if not the most important, is a lady that I met out at Badwater that year, less than 2 months before I attempted it. She agreed. She was actually a massage therapist, and I reached out to her for a massage before the race. And during the massage, I told her about running across the U.S. And by the 20 minutes later, I had her signed up to join for the entire run. and then she ended up doing like 4 different jobs. Like she was driving the RV. She got us the RV from a friend. She cooked amazing meals and she gave me massages. And that was just like a chance encounter, 2 months before it started. So I was so lucky because like it probably would have been a disaster had I just gone about it like on a shoestring budget with, people coming on and off to crew and not having, a team that could get in a good routine for the whole duration.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, and it sounds like I may have accidentally started heading in the right direction on that topic. I've got a couple of guys and my wife who are more or less committed for the whole trip, so that'll be kind of like our core crew, and we might have room for other people along the way that want to do like shorter stints. But yeah, it seems like the two big hurdles are one, like your RV. Two is like who the heck is going to have a month and a half to 2 months of time that they can give up? Or, I mean, I guess you could pay someone to crew you as well, if you have a budget that's big enough for something like that. But so you borrowed an RV. How did you manage that logistically? Was that person based in like the Bay Area and then you had to take it back, or how did you guys get the RV where it needed to be to the end and then back to where it belonged?
Yeah, it was, gosh, I think it was in Las Vegas. So yeah, it was Cinder is the lady that got it for us, and it was she actually. A funny story is she actually owns the RV now, but it was a friend of hers RV, and so yeah, it kind of worked out well where it was already not too far from San Francisco, and then Cinder, bless her heart, drove it all the way back out west after the run was complete, and she made a little bit of a road trip out of it. So yeah, it was just a lucky chance encounter.
Yeah, it seems like with something like this, there's so many variables that are there. Some of them, some of them there's just no way you're going to know ahead of time, that you can definitely overthink this and just work yourself up into a frenzy, lose sleep over it, and probably just sabotage yourself by, kind of overthinking things. But you also have to have like a few kind of core foundational things in place that you can rely on. It sounds like you're saying like having reliable vehicles, having a consistent, reliable crew that can kind of almost predict what you're going to be like or what you're going to go through as it's happening, and responding to are two big ones that you want to make sure are kind of checked off before you take on something like this.
Yeah, absolutely. And for crew, it's you have to be able to trust them, and they have to be people that care. Like the two guys, Chuck and Dean, that were kind of crewing me throughout the day in the chase vehicle. Like they were former military, and they would camp out. Like we learned early on that we didn't want 5 of us sleeping in the RV every night. Like we could have fit us all, but like no one's going to sleep if we got 5 people packed in. So like they camped pretty much every night outside. And like, so they were very selfless individuals. Like, and that's the thing. Like I've had people crew me at races that had an incredible running resume, but they were too busy like taking selfies and what I'm talking about. Like I'm talking about. It's just like, and like those people, like they look good on paper, but they're terrible crew people. But then like there's people like Cinder, Chuck, Dean, and Tracy that were like maybe not like really hardcore ultra marathon runners, but they did the job perfectly because their intentions were all let's get this 29-year-old dude down the road and make sure he stays alive.
Perhaps another thing I did on accident was my two crew outside of my wife at the moment are former military guys as well. It just seems like that one makes so much sense in my mind. The first guy I reached out to, I asked about it. He's like, "Oh yeah, I've owned a RV that was over 30 feet before I know how to drive it. I've driven tanks." It's like, this isn't going to be a problem. The logistics of taking an RV across the country is nothing like going to another country and then setting up infrastructure and base and everything in an area you've never seen before, and you have to do all the recon on the fly. It's like, this is going to be a cakewalk compared to that. I'm like, yeah, well, I'm glad you think so.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so it is funny, kind of like the different personalities or different folks that tend to kind of gravitate to being like really good setups for something like that. And uh, I do want to transition just a bit here because at first glance, when I think of your Alaska to Keys run, is okay, that's got to be infinitely more hard because you're literally not even sure where you're probably going to sleep the next night. And it's, I'm guessing it's out on a road somewhere, but you can correct me if I'm wrong about that. And to a degree, though, you can probably, if you can get in the right headspace, you can almost simplify it because you really don't even have the option to overthink stuff because you can only have what you need. You can't start thinking about, there's just not an option for luxury at any point. So even considering it is off the table. Whereas something like what I'm doing with Transcon, I could always spend more money to make it a little softer, right? But when you're self-supported, all that stuff is basically off the table, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It was, I'm glad I did it in the order that I did it because there was a lot of things that I've learned about, doing a self-supported run, just by people I've met, since my the first Transcon that was supported, and then watching them do it, and seeing how those people go about it. And then just also like the things that I wanted to enjoy about it. And that was a big part of the reason I did the Alaska to Kenai, Alaska to Key West, Florida was I saw I did the Transcon from San Francisco to New York, but I didn't. I mean, it was go 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 all the time, and so I was glad I did it. But I also like met all these people that were doing like, I mean, I've met people that are doing runs around the world where they're like, I mean, I don't think I could get the time off to do that, but I wish I could. But they're literally like running across every single continent, and they're doing 20 miles a day. Nothing, a lot of miles, but not like anything crazy where you're running all the time. So that was kind of the reason I wanted to do Alaska to Florida was go about it not as fast pack as doing like for a record. But yeah, I mean, it was the planning for it was surprisingly simple. I shipped a bunch of gear up to a friend in Alaska 2 months before I started it. I found enough. The good thing about the Alaska Highway is, you might go 100 or more miles without services, but all the services are right there on the road. So you're not like, getting on a horse a bunch to go, stay at a motel. So I actually I only had to camp like maybe 4 or 5 times all the way from Alaska to Florida, just getting lucky and also doing some ridiculously long stretches. And then it was kind of cool because to me, it kind of felt like, I'm not a video gamer, but like, it was like a video game, like unlocking the stages. And like each day was a stage, like, all right, now we're going to run, 80 miles to Watson Lake, Yukon territory. And then tomorrow's a nice easy day, 15 miles, because there's like, another motel just down the road. So that was like the fun thing there is like, I planned it out like a year in advance, just with Google Maps and like finding places to sleep along the way. And then I hardly looked at it at all for like a year, but I printed it out on this laminate, and each day was planned out already from Alaska to Florida. And surprisingly, I stuck exactly to the plan the whole way. And it was just like, oh yeah, I remember planning this a year ago. I'm going to stay at this crappy motel in Timbuktu, and like, and it was just like, you put it on paper a year in advance, and then when you actually come, like you actually are like meeting the people that own these places, and they're really nice, and like there's a story with every place that I stayed. It was just a really cool experience.
I just uploaded 26 unique training plans to my website. They range from 12-week base building plans all the way up to advanced 100-mile training plans. If you're looking for a bit more guidance with your training, please consider checking out my offerings at zachbitter.com. That's ZACHBITTER.com. Once on the site, click the link on the top titled Training Plans and see if anything fits your needs. I'm also looking to continue to add to this catalog, so do not hesitate to reach out with any suggestions. Thanks, everyone. Yeah, the Google Maps thing is a lifesaver for this sort of stuff. I think one thing. So my original attempt was going to be last year, and then I postponed it with all the COVID stuff, which is kind of ironic because I think the end of last year would have probably actually been the best time to do it once all was said and done and we learned what we learned about everything. But such is life, I guess. But before that, I had started planning some of the early stage stuff, and I went on your Strava and I just pulled all the GPX files that you had uploaded off of from your Transcon thing and started piecing together a map. And yeah, it's like you can find all sorts of stuff, like where are the gas stations, where are the grocery stores, where are the hotels, and you can map those things out on there and have a little bit of an itinerary or some options available that help out a little bit on the day of type of stuff. So with Transcon, were you staying in hotels at all along the way, or were you just basically, no, let's just stick to the RV and camping? Or
Yeah, I stayed for that. I stayed in the RV every single night. So yeah, it worked out well. We got so lucky a few times, there were a few stretches like Yosemite, and then maybe a couple other parks where you're not allowed to just park on the side of the road. But we made it to a campground one night where we parked the RV, and then I think Fort Collins, we got out of this national park, or a park just right at 73 miles for the day. It was the end of this really long stretch where we couldn't park. So yeah, it was great. We never had to drive anywhere. We just parked the RV at a certain spot, 70 to 75 miles for the day. And then I just got in and showered, ate, went to bed, and then did it all over again in the morning. So yeah, it was we were really lucky.
yeah, did you ever have situations where there just wasn't a spot to put the RV and you had to go mark your spot essentially and then go somewhere else for the night and stay there? Or were you just able to always find someone that would let you park it in a private area or something like that?
Yeah, we were really lucky. We always had we always got approval. I think for most of the stretch, from Nevada all the way through Pennsylvania, it was just a ranch owner and or just an intersection, a gravel road or something, and maybe we parked a quarter mile down at this intersection with this less busy highway, type of thing. But yeah, surprisingly we got really lucky with the people that were willing to let us just park in their. There were a couple of times where we got woken up in the middle of the night and someone I don't know, someone called the police to check us out and see what was going on. But I got sorted out pretty quick.
Yeah, you preempted my next question. I was going to ask if you had any 2 a.m. knocks on the door from the state trooper saying, "Hey guys, I don't know what you're doing here, but you got to get out."
No, there's a funny story though. So Cinder, she crewed for a lady named Sandra Villines, who got the women's record for speed record a year after I did mine in 2017. And Cinder parked that same RV that she used for mine. I think they're in Nevada, and it was she parked it. She thought it was just an open lot in the middle of nowhere, but it turned out it was some top secret missile location. And I guess the FBI or something came out and it was Breaking Bad type of
oh jeez.
They I don't know if they drew their guns or not, but Cinder was freaking out because they surrounded the RV because she wasn't supposed to be there.
I swear this isn't a meth lab.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it takes a while to explain what you're doing because they're you're doing what? Out here?
I was thinking about that, maybe getting a big 3x3 cardboard sign or something you could hang on the side of the RV saying, this is a Trans-America run in progress. Please be considerate or have sympathy on us. At least don't come guns blazing. But yeah, I mean, did you ever have, I think I remember reading that there at some points you'd have your crew kind of up ahead scouting out spots there that you anticipated roughly where you'd be staying that night, and asking folks who own property if it was okay to park the RV kind of on the side of the property. Am I remembering that right?
Yeah, usually what we did was like I would do like 40 miles and then meet up with the RV for like a break, kind of like a lunch break, and then like a 50K in the afternoon. Um, and during that 50K, I think was kind of when they were scouting out up ahead. We also had a second, so we had two cars. So there was a lady that was driving a second car. So she had more time probably to go even further ahead early in the day to start scouting out like the end of day location and stuff like that. And my sister too, she's kind of always been my remote route guru. So she was always looking at the maps to see just where a good stopping point would be. I remember in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, she found like a minor league baseball field parking lot for us to and called them up and yeah, sure, you can park here. So she was really helpful too from a remote capacity.
Yeah, that's a good thought. I've had some ideas around some remote assistance just from content capturing type of stuff, but that's actually probably a good idea to have an offsite person who's looking at that sort of stuff and making phone calls and things. Because I would imagine most people are going to be pretty accommodating when they find out what you're doing and be like, yeah, we'd love to help you out. And if it just means, not calling the police on you for 12 hours, then sure. Thanks for letting us know.
Yeah. It was great. Yeah. Especially getting into bigger towns, east of the east of the Missouri or Mississippi. There, like churches and stuff like that. They were just really nice people. They're just we loved it. And a lot of times they love, I don't know, just coming to hang out and a lot of times they would feed us dinner and stuff like that. So yeah, that was the coolest thing about it was there's just all these nice people, willing to help out if you let them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you brought up food that I was curious about. I'm just trying to imagine the energy requirements of averaging the number of miles you did per day. Did you do any pre-planning to try to determine I'm going to need to make sure I'm getting in this much? And the way I've been kind of thinking about this, which I think is just a weird kind of paradigm shifting type of mentality of if I was just not moving at all during the day and I decided I was going to cut my let's say I'm sedentary, I'm burning 2,000 calories a day, and I decide I'm going to go down to 1,000 calories a day. I'm going to notice that I cut 1,000 calories out of my intake. It's going to be very obvious. I'm going to be hungry all the time. I'm going to be losing weight. But if I'm doing something that's requiring me to, let's say I'm burning 10,000 calories a day and I manage to eat 9,000, I'm still going to lose that weight, but I may not notice it from just an appetite side of things. How did you kind of go about just food in general and making sure you got enough so that you could get up the next day and still have the energy to kind of keep going?
Yeah. It's tricky because it's I'll go on a run with a friend and I never have enough. I could eat 10,000 calories almost any day, even if I'm not running. And I think it's just from I look back on memories from when I was 10 years ago and I didn't really run much. Or maybe I was just kind of getting into marathons and ultras. And it's just I just remember that I used to get full, legitimate full where I just I'm stuffed. I can't finish the rest of my food. But I mean, ever since I've been doing, much higher volume training, I think I just naturally process calories very quickly. And so I've met a lot of people that have done these transcon runs where they lose 10, 20, 30 pounds. And I don't think I lost, I think I was probably within 5 pounds of when I started, both transcontinental runs. I mean, I was pretty much eating 100 calories. I was getting pretty much 100 calories per mile back the whole way on both of them. And yeah, I think it's just the training, like in like that's one of the biggest things to rapid recovery is like putting in the really high volume. Maybe it's not like making me any more fit, once I reach a certain, miles per week, but it's almost like the nutrition aspect is the part that I'm training.
Mm-hmm.
The ability to recover really quickly and get lots of calories. And like I was probably digesting calories pretty much nonstop for 43 or whatever days. Like I would wake up in the middle of the night and I'd eat a couple protein bars just to kind of keep it going. Cause like my mentality was, let's not shut down the kitchen. Like, let's just keep the stomach, processing calories pretty much 24/7 so that I'm optimizing as much recovery as I can and, not shutting it down at all the whole way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really interesting. I think like the two things that I don't know if I should say scare me, but that I'm concerned and trying to account for the most between now and starting is one, the food, and then two, sleep, because like you have to get good sleep or good enough sleep for something like this, I would imagine.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think you can probably take some risks when you're within a week or so from the finish if you want to kind of speed things up a bit. But when you're on the first week and you're going to be out there for another 5 after that, you can't have a lot of nights where you get only a couple hours of sleep and expect for that to end well for you. So were you doing anything to like make sure you were getting good sleep, or have you just been a really good sleeper traditionally? Did you prepare anything ahead of time to kind of be able to have an idea of what it was going to be like to sleep in an RV for that long?
Yeah, no, I am on the RV. Just to touch on that quickly, I did sleep in the RV probably like 3 or 4 nights before we started. So that was kind of nice to kind of get used to, that routine of like just the bed, the windows and everything, and like optimize it as much as possible before we started. Um, I'm a terrible sleeper, and that's like that. Like I've attempted 2 6-day races, which I mean they're just kind of like they're just kind of like any other fixed time race where the objective is to run as many miles as you can in 6 days. Sleep whenever you want. If you want to sleep 8 hours a night, you can. If you want to sleep 1 hour, you can. But like I really struggle to sleep. It takes what I've noticed is it's really hard for me. Like I have to like sit and let my blood pressure and heart rate just completely normalize before I can get to sleep. So when I was doing the transcon specifically, I would, get done for the day. I would like within 5 minutes of finishing for the day, I would shower and have dinner. But I usually made that like, I didn't like go straight to bed ever from running, just because I knew I'm not going to fall asleep for an hour or two anyways. So that was, so we would be strategic and like do planning for the next day while I was like trying to cool down in the RV. But yeah, the sleep piece, I survived a couple of days where I can't remember, it was like a mountain lion or something was like making noises outside the RV one night. And right by the Utah Colorado border, Dinosaur National Park. And anyway, like there were a couple of days where I was like, I'm so screwed. Like I'm half asleep. I have to go run in like half an hour. Like I got 2 hours of probably legitimate sleep. And I actually had okay days then, but yeah, like you can't really afford to have 2 bad nights of sleep in a row. So for me, like we had a lady that she had like I have that app. It's like, I think it's called the Calm app. And sometimes like I'll listen to music and stuff on there today. And so back then, Tracy, one of the ladies on the support team, she had like something kind of like that she would put on Bluetooth speakers for me to listen to get to sleep. So that helped. But yeah, I didn't really like I like to take this stuff called Performance Tea, that has it's like a CBD tea. And I didn't use CBD back then, but I would definitely, today, if I was doing something like that.
Yeah, there's probably some like sleep hygiene protocols that would maybe be useful with like some sort of like a tea or like an herbal type of thing that'll kind of calm you or speed up that process between finishing and cooling down and feeling tired enough to fall asleep. And this is probably a good spot for this question because I think it maybe fits in with what we've been talking about. And one of my strategies that I've been playing around with was, rather than saying, okay, I'm going out here to chase X number of miles, or I'm going to make sure I'm trying to stay on Pete's tracks as much as possible, is just hold myself accountable to, say, like a 12 to 14 hour per day window where this is the time I have to move. And it can be a combination of running, walking. But at that window, at the end of the high end of that window is where I cut it off regardless, just so I know I have at least 10 hours between the finish and the start of the next day, so that I can have a couple hours to eat, clean up, fall asleep, and then, hopefully get, somewhere in the neighborhood of 8 hours if possible. Maybe that's a pipe dream. But did you have a similar strategy to that? Or were you more just like, oh, let's just take this one day at a time. If I feel really good this day, I'm going to push a little further and maybe, take a couple hours on the back end of the day and kind of strike while the iron's hot. And if tomorrow we suffer a little bit because of it, then it's okay because I banked a little bit of time? Or what was your strategy like for that?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, to going out, I didn't know what I was doing. I mean, I was like, I started on my birthday. So the first day I was like, it'd be cool if I ran 3 times my age. So 86. Like I was just being an idiot. And so yeah, like I didn't start until 8 a.m. the first day, which, doesn't sound late, but like my goal was also to move back the clock. So like start at 8 a.m. the first day, start at 7 a.m. the next day, and then 6 a.m. But I was struggling, and I wasn't getting done until, 10, 11 at night on some of those first few days. So yeah, I mean, that about a week in, I realized like, okay, we need more structure, after I took that day off. And so that was like the thing, like you need to get done by dinner time. And like, I began liking, starting at 3 or 4 in the morning. Cause mentally getting through like a marathon before the sun comes up was like just really refreshing and rewarding. And it calmed me down too, to realize like, if you do have a bad day, you can be out here till, after 6 o'clock, maybe once or twice a week. But that never really ended up being the case anyway.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. I think like the other kind of side piece to that, that's a little bit of an uncontrollable, and part of the reason why I think these type of things are done during the timeline that you did, I think you started in early September, is you gotta have to make it over the Sierras before winter sets in. You don't want to go through the Midwest during the summer, or the heat of the summer anyway, but you got to get to the East Coast before winter sets in too. So there is kind of this little bit of a tight timeline where it's optimal. Did you have any weather issues along the way, or did you get pretty lucky on that front?
Yeah, I did. I was pretty lucky. I mean, when we were in Pennsylvania, it was probably the worst because it was like flooding and like raining nonstop for several days. But we did get snow in Utah on Fairview Pass. But I mean, it snowed kind of to end the day. And then it was like the first few miles the next day before I got, down off the pass. There might've been like 4 or 5 inches of snow to trudge through. But yeah, I was pretty lucky. Now, Sandra, she actually started about the same exact day I did, but a year later, she got a ton of snow in Colorado, where to the point where we knew the storm was coming. So she decided to go, or I basically from Missouri made the decision for her that she had to go up and over the pass right before you get to Steamboat Springs, or maybe it's after Steamboat Springs. But anyways, because there was a storm coming. So if she waited another day and didn't do it that night, she probably would have been stuck crew wise, for a day or two. So yeah, I mean, I would say your odds are really good that you won't have anything like that happen. But yeah, it's so weird because like there were days, there was a day even in Iowa, late October where it just felt like it was like 90 degrees. So you just never know
Mhm.
you're going to get.
The Midwest weather is always a bit of a coin flip. I think, like, I always think the Mad City 100K when I was living in Wisconsin, you'd have a year where it was like freezing and then a year where it hits 80 degrees and it just don't know for sure until you get within like a week or so of the event.
Mhm.
So that's definitely something I've thought about too, is just, what needs two things, I guess, with that. One is weather management. And second is just terrain variance. So like, you and I are probably, at least by the ultra running community, considered more flat runners for the most part, or
Yeah.
timed event type guys. So like, when you have the transcon, you're doing everything at some point. So you're going over the Sierras, which is going to be a lot different than, passing through the Midwest. You mentioned that you got a little dinged up with some tendonitis in that first week. Do you think that was because of kind of the elevation variance kind of going over the Sierras, or was that more to do with just kind of being a little bit of, you mentioned like being maybe a little too aggressive in the beginning, that could have fed into that a bit too?
Yeah, it was definitely the Yosemite day, all the climbing in Yosemite National Park. I think it was something crazy. Like I started the day just outside the park at like 3,000 feet. And the end of the day, we were staying at 10,000 feet, plus, a lot of downs and back up. So like, it was just a crazy day. I can't remember what the gain was, but I mean, for road, it was just something ridiculous. So yeah, that was what caused kind of like the front of your ankle. Like, I think it's like called like anterior tibular tendonitis, which is pretty common from what like people like Joe Fegis and others that have done a lot of multi-days told me it's pretty common in multi-day running. But I think it was just really bad for me because I hadn't done like, I had done some hill work, hill running in the Midwest, but like I didn't like what I should have done is I should have got on a treadmill and just like power hiked,
Mm.
at 10% grade, because that's what it ended up being, was all the like power walking up all those inclines in Yosemite that did me in eventually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's interesting because I was thinking about that too, just like what are some like maybe strength exercises I could do with like some of the, my thought is ankles and feet are going to be like really sensitive areas for something like this. So like bolstering those up or doing some things that can maybe protect them a little more than I normally would going into it. And the treadmill idea is interesting too, because the unique situation I have here for mine is starting in September means any specific training I do for this is going to be in the heat of the summer in Phoenix. So like, I'm just not going to go out for 12, 14 hours on a training run in the middle of the summer in Phoenix. And I can obviously leave town if I really need to, if I want to kind of make it a little more comparable to the project itself. But the other thought I had was doing some treadmill work on some of those days to replicate some of those very train situations. And that might be the way to do it, is if, uh, here's the question, I guess. One thing I'm playing around with doing is at least one kind of simulation where I do like a 3-day stretch where I just try to replicate what a day would be like on the Transcon, and just do that for 3 days in a row, just to get a little bit of a better look at, one, what are my energy requirements going to be from a 12 to 14 hour session? What is it like to try to get to sleep at the end of that? And yeah, just kind of tease out some of the stuff that you can't really know without doing it. So question one with that is, do you think that's a good strategy? And question two is, should I use one of those days just to basically do some climbing and descent?
Yeah, no, I think that's perfect. Yeah, because then because that's the thing, like you don't really know how it's going to go until either you do it and screw up, or or you do something in advance. So yeah, I would definitely do something like that. Like for me, I was lucky because I I did some. I mean, I did like back to back. Like I think I don't know if I did like 70-mile back to back to back, but I did like 60-mile back to back, and then I had done like a week long kind of like FKT type run a couple of years in advance. So that kind of also gave me some confidence going in. But yeah, I think that's perfect mentality.
Hey folks, I want to make a quick shout out to some of my personal athlete sponsors and offer all of you some discount options if you think my gear is also right for you. My shoe of choice, Ultra Footwear, is offering listeners 15% off. They make a foot-shaped, balanced, cushioned shoe that fits like a glove. S Fuels is offering 5% off, and they are my go-to low-carb workout and lifestyle product of choice. Egg Weights is offering 15% off their running form, strength work, and recovery products. Finally, Purpose Performance Wear is offering 10% off my favorite workout apparel, including my own signature series. So head over to zachbitter.com/mygear or the profile link on my social media channels to check out these discounts and more. All right, folks, now back to the show. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because one of the biggest differences I kind of see just in my general training program and what I kind of see you doing on Strava is, I mean, you're just like, there's high mileage runners, which I would consider myself. And then there's kind of freakishly high mileage runners, which I'd put you into. I actually remember a few years back, I think it's probably right before the Transcon, you had started using Strava, and it was just like 200 plus mile week after 200 plus mile week. So you may actually have a little bit more of a lifelong adaptation for the types of rigor that's going to take for a project like Transcon versus my slightly maybe more periodized schedule where I'm not probably doing as much, well, I'm definitely not doing as much volume as you, but I'm introducing some what would be considered non-specific race day intensity type workouts a little more often. Yeah, and my kind of thought with that is like, I think I'm gonna kind of treat the first half of the year like a normal racing season and go through those periodized paces, because I just feel like when I do that, my body's the strongest, but then dip my toe into those waters just enough leading into Transcon so I know what I'm getting into, and so I'm like at least semi-adapting to the physical demands of the exact mechanics and intensity that I'll be using on event or project. I should say project timeline, because it's not a day, it's not a week, it's more than a month.
Yeah, I think that's good, because what I've noticed is like if I try, like in 2017, I kind of did this where like if I tried doing like 200-mile weeks for more than a couple months at a time, like it just becomes overkill. And because like it's sustainable in some ways, but in other ways it's not sustainable to train that crazy for that long. So yeah, I think doing like a race season and then really getting into the more specific stuff, for a couple of months, 2 to 3 months is perfect.
Cool. No, that works out well with my timeline. So I'm glad it's got the record holder seal of approval.
All right.
Let's see. I know there's essentially an endless number of questions I could ask you about this particular project. I think it would be fun to kind of have you back on as we get closer to the project and run through some of the things that I've done and see what your thoughts are about them and if there's any feedback and things like that. But is there anything I guess maybe here's a good question. What were a couple things that kind of popped up along the way that you were like, oh, if I had known that ahead of time, I would have done this differently?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, for me, like later in the run, for that Transcon from San Francisco to New York, I think it's just like trying to get into a routine as quickly as possible, like in every aspect, like in like the time you're waking up, like the time you're getting done each day. Also, like one thing I did was like I mean, it was basically like I was doing like around 72 plus or minus a couple miles every single day. So like, what I did was like I just tried to find games, like numbers games, to like not make it not seem as crazy. So like 72 is you can divide 72 by 4, it's 18. I don't really play golf, but like I treated the day as like a round of golf in a way. Like
4 miles is one hole, like 4 shots. So it was like 72 shots, for the whole day. And so like, like I was always like, all right, I'm on the front 9, I'm going to get through 10 holes before lunch and then go do 8 after lunch type of thing. So like just things like that. Like I think like, yeah, it makes it it kind of takes, something really cool, like a transcontinental run, and turns it into like something really nerdy and dumb. Like you're just like trying to get through the day. But I think it was like, just like when I really needed like a boost, like that was kind of what I fell back on, was just like the math and like just taking stock of like, treating each day like it's just, like Groundhog Day, like same thing over and over again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, because that's kind of been my mentality with just training and racing in general the last couple of years now, where I feel like when I do my best in terms of executing training programs and then executing a race itself, it's when I'm able to really compartmentalize different things. And one thing that I try not to take for granted that I did earlier in my career is what very simple, almost like comically lame type of like mind games and things will actually motivate you when you're out there doing that. So like, things like, oh, if I run two more miles, I get that bottle of water. It sounds like, how motivating could that be? But when you're out there and you're trying to keep your mind from focusing on the end of a race, when you're too early into it to be thinking about the very end, it distracts you from kind of overwhelming yourself, or that anxiety provoking thought of trying to wrap your head around the entirety of the project or the race. And I think that works really well on race day. I think it feeds into training too, where, sometimes I find myself and others, they get excited about an event that's maybe 4 months down the road, and they're like, okay, I'm going to do this, this, and this to get ready for it. And they're always thinking of that end reward, the race itself. And that kind of nuance and excitement wanes somewhere around like week 4 or 5. So you have to have little wins along the way too, where like, oh yeah, I'm looking forward to doing this workout on the plan because it's going to tell me this about my fitness, or this about what I should do next. And finding those little motivators, or it's like an Easter egg hunt almost, where finding that next little egg before you get the full basket is always worth kind of keeping in mind when you're playing all the mind games that occur with something like what you've done.
Yeah, absolutely. Like one thing I always think of is like, I remember I always used to do these like 5-mile, when I lived in Nebraska, we'd do these like winter no frills 5 miles where you run 2.5 miles out and 2.5 miles back. And they're just like weekend time trials every weekend. And like that's one of the things like I use like things like that. Like when I have 5 miles left, out of 70 miles, like remember that one time you ran, a 5-mile time trial, you were running 5-minute miles, like you were done in like less time than an episode of a show. And like, so like using like mind games from like when you're, obviously you're not going to cover 5 miles after you've already done 60 some at a 5-minute pace, but just like remembering like, man, 5 miles is not far at all. Like when you think of it, like in terms of running a much faster pace, like in other types of events. And so that's another thing that I would use is like, think of it as if like you were 100% fresh and thinking about the distance you have left for the day. And like, it's really not that far. Like you get up to do 20 miles in the morning, a lot of mornings, and you got 20 miles left for the day. That's not that far.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You can always kind of rationalize it, especially when you have like the training to go along with it. When you get to those later stages, I think that's always, I always think of that with 100-mile racing too. When I hit the point where I'm within range of my longest long run leading into that, it's like, okay, now I can forget about 100 miles and think about just one more long run. And I think you probably have to be doing that basically nonstop during something like the Transcon.
Yeah.
One question I want to ask that I forgot to follow up on when you were talking about before is just kind of the way you structured your fueling. So you said you did one thing that you did really well was you maintained for the most part weight, and you were able to get in a lot of food. How did that look logistically during the running portions and walking portions of the day? Were you constantly getting restocked from your crew, or were you doing long stretches by yourself with like a pack and enough stuff to get you to the next checkpoint and then reloading and going? Or was it basically someone kind of trailing you and here's another bottle, here's another bar, here's another this, that, and the other thing?
Yeah, I had, I started out with like carrying a handheld and stuff with me sometimes, but I quickly realized, like, I think by like day 2 or 3, like, this is stupid. Like, there's these two guys literally like tracking me all day. Let's just like give them, or like just rely on them for basically everything. So pretty quickly, I never carried anything, and they would basically go like, I think we were doing like 1.5 miles, 2 miles at a time. Sometimes a little bit more depending on like what the road was like. Um, so yeah, like I mean, they were handing me something almost every 2 miles to eat or drink. So it worked out well. And I was like, the only thing I was carrying with me was a stupid Garmin InReach, like the live tracking device. So like it looked like I was carrying like a walkie-talkie in my hand the whole time.
Yeah, and that's kind of a necessity if you want to have all the data to have it official, right? You need to have probably multiple, or at least it was at least 2 GPX files that are showing kind of your route you took.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Like I would do like Strava, but then separately, like if people wanted to come run with me, I did the live tracking with the InReach so that they could find me pretty easily.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. Did you have a lot of people jumping in along the way?
Not really the first like half. But then I think once I got to like the Midwest, I feel like it was a combination of getting to like places that I'd lived before, and then also just like more people finding out about it, and then also just being in more populated areas. So like the second half, I had someone to run with just about every day, but like it was pretty lonely the first half of the run. Like it was the only people that came out were like people that were like really hardcore interested in like doing like a full marathon or longer distance with me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It is. That's one thing I've been interested in, is like, there's probably a balance between certain points where you're like, I just kind of want to struggle by myself versus I could really use a partner right now to kind of change the topic and talk to and get distracted from what you're doing. But I think probably that latter one outweighs the former in most cases, especially once you have a few days under your legs.
Yeah, it's tricky because like sometimes I didn't want company, and like, I'm not gonna tell someone to like leave. Like I don't want to be a jerk. But then like it was interesting. Like once I got like, if I was in a bad mood, like eventually like just someone else suffering with me, it was like eventually I got to a point where like I would start talking back to them or like, initiating the conversation. So I think in the end it was almost always good to have people to run with, but like sometimes it took me a little convincing that I wanted to talk to someone.
Yeah, I could imagine like the emotions are somewhat unpredictable when you're putting yourself through that sort of stuff. But a lot of people probably jumping in are fairly aware that that's a possibility, that if you're in a rough spot, that they may just be kind of like a calming presence versus a sounding board for you to be talking to with a lot of stuff. But interesting. I think one other thing I wanted to ask you about, and I'm actually just ignorant to whether this is acceptable or not for a documented attempt, is polls. Did you use polls? And if not, why? And if so, is that something that's like with the transcontinental community, they're like frowned upon or accepting of?
I didn't use polls. I think I just didn't really think about it. But like, I mean, Marshall Ulrich, when he went for his attempt in 2008, I feel like I remember seeing him using them. So I don't think anyone would have an issue with someone using polls.
Mm-hmm. I was just thinking, like, I thought about it as we were talking about the tendonitis in the front of your ankle. I was wondering if some of those uphill sections, if you could disperse some of that impact off to your upper body, you could maybe alleviate a little bit of that. Or in a less than ideal situation, you have that flare up, having a set of poles to maybe, if you want to try to at least move slow that following day or that first day back, using something like that just to take a little bit of the pressure off that area. But it's probably like anything. If you don't practice with them at all or use them at all, it's maybe not a good idea, and you end up with tendonitis in your shoulder instead.
Yeah, that was probably, like I don't have much upper body strength. So I was just like, yeah, I'll just let the legs do it. And if something bad happens, it happens.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it sounds like you had a pretty good balance of just, a body of work behind you where you had the physical and mental capabilities of doing something like this. You had enough of the things accounted for that you weren't going to end up super high and dry somewhere in the Midwest. But you also were open enough to just like not overthinking things, letting things kind of happen as they do and respond to them, and not letting that be like a big point of anxiety and stress for you, which I think is probably why you're able to do what you do for a big part of it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, I think, yeah, I think it's just, I mean, confidence is such a big thing, and not, and just knowing your body and not, putting yourself in a situation, which I kind of did early on, but then, learning your lesson. And I think it was kind of good that I had that, that injury early on, because it taught me, like, I never really overextended myself from there on out. And I've seen people get cute and like they try to, like, cut back on sleep here and there towards the end of something like that. But I mean, I was all the way through. I was pretty consistent and not trying to get ahead of myself, which I think was a good lesson I learned early on.
Yeah, you probably learned it in the right spot. At least you didn't have like a bunch of other things going wrong at the same time that could have really derailed things. Same topic, but slightly different. One thing I'm somewhat concerned about, or I just know I need to have a process for, is foot care. Were you doing anything specific to take care of your feet? Because I'm just thinking, like, if you get a blister like on the ball of your foot or your heel or something like that, like, there's things you can do, but it's just one more big kind of hurdle to get over. Did you have blister issues? If so, what did you do to manage it? And if not, what did you do or think you did to kind of keep that from happening?
Yeah, I had one blister. It was kind of a freak one, because I usually don't get blisters very often, but I had one that, like, was just nagging, that, like, never went away really. It was just kind of, we managed it. I think it started because I was too stubborn to take a rock out of my shoe, honestly. And it, like, thankfully, Dean, he's like a EMT paramedic dude. Like, he's got like a million different like certifications, but he was one of the two crew guys, and so, like, he loved, like he almost, like, I feel like he almost wanted me to have stuff like that happen so that he could, like, just show his, like, skills and everything. So, like, I mean, he put like this fancy, like, Band-Aid around it, and, like, every day he was, like, checking on it and stuff like that, cleaning it every day and things like that to make sure, like, I didn't get, I don't know, like, any weird infections. But yeah, I didn't really have like a normal, like, self-care routine. I mean, like, squirrel's nut butter, like, I put that pretty much on it, any square inch of skin. So but other than that, like, it was yeah, I'm really lucky with blisters and that type of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I've used squirrel's nut butter for a while too, and that stuff, I'm always surprised at how long that stuff actually stays. Like, when I first started using it, my thought was like, oh, this will be great for, like, the first couple hours, and then it'll wear off or it'll rub off, and then it won't be effective, or I'll have to reapply. But I don't think I've ever actually reapplied it during a race, because it just never has been an issue to need to. But maybe that'd be different with something like the Transcon, where you're out there every day like that. Maybe a little bit of different rubbing in certain areas, but that's always worked well for me. I plan on using it liberally. I was thinking about also just possibly, like, pre-taping or pre-bandaging areas that would, I'm kind of like you. I usually don't get blisters. If I do, it's kind of from some odd thing, like, oh, the race course environment was a little different than I thought it was, and the pair of shoes I decided to wear wasn't the ones I should have decided to wear, or I laced them the wrong way for this environment and something like that. And you get some weird blister that's not necessarily unique to your gait specifically. So I'm trying to be mindful that something like that will likely occur at some point, but also not trying to overthink it and turn it into a problem that it doesn't have to be either. But yeah, I was thinking about maybe like some bandages or KT tape on a spot that could potentially give an issue. But then I think you probably also have to make sure you're cleaning that area up and taking that off and putting it back on which is another step. So
Yeah.
it's endless.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Yeah. Cause it's just, you're going to be disgusting every day. And then but like on like a race, like you're going to want to shower every single day. And like, yeah, I just tried my best to eliminate like any extra hurdles that I could on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm. One last question, Pete, and then I'll let you go. Or we can talk about anything else that you want to talk about too. I'd like to hear what you got planned coming up. But the final one was with the RV. Did you find it challenging? Because I mean, you're showering in that. You've got your crew. I'm assuming you're using it as a bathroom too. Was it hard to find areas where you could service the RV from just like a cleaning standpoint and reloading the water and stuff like that? Or was that something that was easier than I'm imagining it to be?
Oh gosh, I don't know. Like that's the thing. Like Cinder did such a good job figuring all that stuff out. I mean, I have to think like, when you're out like some of those remote sections in like Utah, Nevada, like I mean, we even were able to stay we were able to end a day like at an RV park. So even though it's like, super desolate out there, like there are, you will come across, a better concentration of, that type of those type of services, just given the nature that you're out on the road. So yeah, I don't think so, but she might, if she was on the call, she'd probably disagree and be like, oh, you don't know how hard it was.
I might have to have you put me in touch with her and have her come on the podcast and share all the stuff they did behind the scenes while you were out there suffering on the roads.
Yeah, no, she would be a great guest. And actually, are you signed up for Jackpot in a few weeks?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because I'll be out there doing the 24, and she's supposed to crew for me, so I'll have to put you in touch with her.
Yeah. I'd love to chat. And get as much learning as I can from the folks who've done it and seen it from inside and out. So cool. Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Jackpot, the 24-hour you're doing was it 24th or that one's there's a couple different dates for that one. I think the 23rd is the 100-mile USATF Road Championships, and the 24th is the 24-hour, and then their typical 100-mile event, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, sorry. Can you repeat that?
Oh yeah, sorry. For Jackpot, so you're doing the 24-hour there. You're doing that one on the 24th.
Uh-huh. Yep. Yeah, Saturday, the 24th.
Nice. Is that a target race for you, or are you using it as kind of a tune-up for something down the road?
I'm signed up for 24 in the Dome, and I think that'll be like a bigger goal. This one, I think I just want to have like, something kind of like the 100 miler I did a week, like this last week, was just kind of like a stair step, type of race, like not like any PR type of distance, but just, get out there, have fun, get some sun, get that tan so I don't get burnt in any of the other races.
Yeah, I think that's we have a similar setup. I'm thinking of I'll probably do 12 hours at the Dome again, like I did in 2019. But yeah, definitely check that one out. It's in terms of the timed events I've done, it's like, I mean, timed events and these track events are typically all about as much control as you can get. That one takes it to a whole nother level where it's, 60 degrees the entire time because it's on that speed skating rink facility. And then obviously your lighting is exactly the same from the start to the finish. So you don't have to deal with weird weather fluctuations, sun beating down on you, that sort of stuff. So it'd be, I think you're probably targeting the right one for peaking if that's your kind of plan. So I might see you a couple times before the midsummer then.
Cool. Yeah, that'd be awesome. Yeah, that's what I was telling someone. It's like, for like a race where you're running around the clock, like a 24-hour, it's like you're either going to get, I mean, there's hardly any races where it's like you're going to be in some cases over 80 degrees, which is definitely not optimal, or like under 40 degrees, which is not optimal either. So like, yeah, having something where it's consistent the whole way, I think would be incredible. So I'm really looking forward to doing that one.
Yeah, it'll be fun to see. Oh, you're going to do 24 there, you think?
I think so. Yeah, that's what I'm signed up for. I considered the 6 day, but like I feel like 6 days I have to like reserve for like across the years in Phoenix, because it has to be like where I'm not gonna want to race for like a couple of months at least, just to recover from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've always wondered a little bit, just like when you nail a 6 day, like the number of miles that could be potentially done on that is mind boggling. It sounds like maybe it's weird because 6 days, it's like it's short enough where you can really, really push the needle on sleep deprivation, but it's long enough where if you can move quick enough when you're out there moving, I could see an argument to sleeping a little more than what certainly more than what Giannis does. I mean, I think he slept like 8 hours one time for the entire 6 day versus like Joe Fegis, who I think he's sleeping closer to like 30 hours over the course of it. Maybe I'm off on that by a little bit, but I know he sleeps more than Giannis. So it's kind of a little bit of a chess match in the sense that you got to kind of have a strategy and hope it works, or have a strategy and be open to flexing it if you're racing someone and they're doing something different that seems to be working better than what you're doing. But yeah, I'm looking forward to the day that Pete runs 700 miles in 6 days or something like that.
Me too, man. I will say that that's like the only world record I think I would have the capability of doing if I was like right conditions, right fitness. Because I think that's like Giannis's one record, Giannis Kuros, where I think he is the most vulnerable out of like any of his, crazy 24-hour plus, events that he's done.
Yeah, he's set the standard for the time events, no doubt. And the 6 day is just an interesting one. I think it'll be interesting to see where that event goes as the sport kind of continues to grow and we see a little more popularity across the board. And I'll be excited to see your progression with that one. For myself, I just hope to never be in a position where I'm considering a 6 day event, although it's not something I would rule out, I guess. So we'll see. At one point in my life, I said I'd never run an ultra marathon. So you're always kind of in that point at some time. So awesome, Pete. If there's anything else you want to chat about, we can certainly do that. Otherwise, I'd love to share with the listeners like where they can find you if you have a website, social media, and things like that, and they can check out what you're up to.
Yeah. I think most people like to follow me on Strava just because they see these ridiculous miles. I love Instagram, Pete Kostelnik on there. And I think I'm on Facebook. Pete's Feet Across America is kind of the slogan page I've kind of adapted to. I'm always looking for new stuff to do. So I think 2021 will be cool. Not really sure. Like I'd love to do another transcontinental run, like maybe across Australia or something like that. But it just doesn't, I don't know, like that's got the international hurdle to get over. So I don't know if that would be like this year type of thing or next year, but always looking, I wish I could do half as many of the transcontinental ideas I come up with, but it's just, you only live so long and you only have so many resources to do it all.
Yeah. Well, I know we have at least a small contingent of Aussie listeners here. So if you folks hear this, hook Pete up with a corporate Aussie place that'll just plan the thing for him and bring him out there and let him run across the country.
Yeah, no doubt.
But yeah, that's cool. So you're more in line with kind of checking out new areas with that stuff, or do you think you'd ever take another swing at Trans America and see if you can better your record?
Yeah, I don't know. I think I could have done a little bit better. But yeah, it's tricky though, because it's just, you only get so many at bats with stuff like that. So who knows? Yeah.
It's like, do you want to spend it on with the opportunity to potentially improve your previous mark, or do you want to spend that time going across a different country or a different project altogether? And yeah, like you said, I mean, I feel like when I first got into ultra marathons in 2010, it was like right as the sport was kind of starting to uptick. And every year since, it's like the list of things you want to do grows at a faster rate than things you check off the list from the year before. So it becomes less and less desirable to repeat events, but that may just be our reality at this point in time. So it's a good problem to have. So I'm not complaining, but it is an interesting kind of time to be an ultramarathoner.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's just it's endless possibilities. Especially once you get into them, like, you get hooked on, doing a race every year or things like that. And then you just feel like everything just fills up and like just naturally fills up. Like, I feel like I'm always like trying to take stuff off my plate that I have planned rather than add it, just because I think I overdo it sometimes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, most people would definitely think you overdo it, Pete, but it's good to hear it from you. Well, yeah, thanks a bunch for taking some time, Pete. I'd love to have you back on down the road and kind of share stories and chat about stuff like this. But thanks for taking some time out of your day, and I'll make sure to link in the show notes for folks who want to check out what Pete's up to, whether on Strava, on Pete's feed on Facebook, or on Instagram. I'll put those links in the show notes, but thanks again.
Cool. Thanks for having me, Zach. Yeah, I'd love to be back anytime and having more discussions.
All righty. Take care.
All right.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Human Performance Outliers podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please consider checking out my website at zachbitter.com or my social media channels at zachbitter on Instagram, at zbitter on Twitter, and at zach.bitter on Facebook. You can also support the show by subscribing and leaving a review on your favorite podcast platform. If you have any questions or comments, please do not hesitate to send me an email at hpopodcast@gmail.com. Thanks again for tuning into the show.